Good afternoon. This is a tropical update for Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. As always, my thoughts in this video are mine alone, and making any decisions, please consult the National Hurricane Center and your local officials for the latest information for where you are. So we're going to spend the majority of our time on Tropical Storm Franklin, as it is now located over Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic. This is likely to re-intensify and reorganize once it gets over the open waters of the Atlantic in the next 3 to 5 days. And then briefly towards the end of the video, we're going to have to keep an eye on what goes on down here across the southwestern Caribbean. So looking at our close-in, zoomed-in view satellite imagery on Tropical Storm Franklin, this has been quite the struggle to locate a center, a closed-off surface low-pressure system. Today, we have a better idea where that might be located. And when we take a look at the visible satellite imagery, we can see low-level clouds. We're not looking at the upper levels here. We're looking at the low levels. And we can see we have winds that are doing this on the northwestern side. They're blowing in out of the easterly. And then we have winds that are coming in out of the northwesterly here. And then they're curving around here. So what we have here is probably a semblance of at least a low and mid-level center that might be located or just moving off of the coast here of Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic. Now, at the same time, this is still a fragile vortex, and what I mean by that is we're not seeing a good semblance of a very strong, well-defined center based on what I see here. If we look over the Haitian Peninsula, we have very light, loose winds over this region where we don't have much of a northerly wind that is closing off this surface low. So at the point when we take a look at our we don't have recon aircraft. They did sample the system though, but they missed the center. But what it did indicate that there was a little bit of northeasterly winds, but they were not able to get the far western side to see if there is northerly winds. But based on this image, it is possible we might have a little bit of a northerly breeze, maybe at 4 or 5 miles an hour. But again, the strongest winds here are in the right front quadrant and the northeastern quadrant of Franklin, which seems to be where all the deep convection is occurring, where you see this boiling in the atmosphere, an indication we have some pretty ferocious winds on that. The only data that we were able to capture and be fortunate about is an ASCAT pass that was able to sample the circulation. And again, we have loose winds here on the western side, very loose winds on the southern side. But here we have a pretty good amount of very strong, intense winds that are reaching tropical storm force, that is 40 miles an hour or greater, that are impacting the eastern fringes here of Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic. Probably some pretty strong winds too, right over the Puerto Rico area. So at this time, while it does look a bit better organized, as we can see here on the visible satellite imagery, the low-level center is still kind of lopsided because we do have shear also being imparted from the westerly, as you can see with all these cloud filaments, which indicates we have shear roughly about maybe 20 to 30 knots. The shear, though, however, is going to soon subside in the next couple of days. The reason for that is the weather pattern to the north of this system is still quite complicated. We have a trough of low pressure seen on the water vapor imagery over the northeastern U.S., we have a cutoff low. This is what we call a TUT, a tropical upper tropospheric trough that is cutting away and is actually retrograding over the southern Gulf of Mexico. And what this is going to do, it's still helping to impart this southwesterly flow over the system, preventing the vortex to better get stacked and better align itself. What you need for a system to intensify is these two vortexes able to kind of stack on top of one another. The mid-level vortex stacking on top of the surface vortex. That should happen, though, once the system, or once Franklin moves out into this area and it finds itself in a better conducive environment. Looking at the latest Euro model, this is the ECMWF from tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video showing us where the system is. This is actually, we need to, there we go. There's a 12Z model output. This is for this afternoon. Again, there's our TUT that we were talking about. This is going to actually help something else to develop. We'll discuss more about that at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. For people that do live along the Florida coast, the southern U.S., may want to keep an eye on what goes on down here. But in the meantime, this trough is actually backing away. At the same time, this subtropical ridge here is actually going to help be able to back build or forward flank build within the next couple of days, and that's going to help to relax the shear. But in the meantime, we have this southwesterly flow at 200 millibars, which is again imparting that southwesterly shear over the system. Once we go out to about 36 hours, this is going to be for Thursday afternoon, August 24th. Again, the shear is still with Franklin, so Franklin is not in a hurry to reorganize or re-intensify once it moves off of Hispaniola this evening into the overnight hours. However, though, this trough right here, you can see the outline of it. This is actually going to be dropping to, or it's going to be moving out of the picture, and we're going to see this little bit of a TUT right here develop, this little trough at 200 millibars, and watch what happens here. This is going to help to abate a lot of this westerly wind belt. So now we have Franklin that is now located in a lighter shear environment in about 57 hours from now. Then by the time we go into day 3, 75 or so hours out by Saturday, here's your upper level troposphere trough. Here's the outflow. This is a healthy, optimal position for Franklin to reorganize. When we get outflow in all quadrants, the system's able to breathe out a lot of that heat, since hurricanes and tropical systems are heat-driven engines that we rely on, or we shouldn't rely on, but they allow the heat to escape out of the atmosphere, and they do that at 200 millibars. So when we go forward here in about 4.5 or 5 days, we can see here very intense outflow in most quadrants here. So this is a fairly favorable environment for Franklin to intensify, and it does it in a pretty quick, in a hurry, as we go to day 5 on Monday, and then day 6, we can see that flow. Now we do have another trough that drops down here into, say, Tennessee and Kentucky by day 5, or by day 6, I should say. This is complicated now, because if the trough comes in a little sooner, then maybe the system might be able to hit Bermuda, versus if the trough up here in the eastern U.S. is able to arrive later, before this ridge is able to erode, then the system might be able to get a little bit closer to the U.S. But right now, there is no definitive any way possible that this system is going to make any direct landfall on the eastern U.S. And I'll show you here in just a second. So the water vapor imagery, again, there is Franklin strongly sheared. A lot of the moisture is well strangulated to the eastern side of the system, drier air imparting on the western side of the system, because of that 30 to 40 knot shear that the system is going to be thriving in. But once it gets into this better environment, you can see all that moisture curling up. The mid and low level vortexes restack, and when that happens, we can get a fairly quick intensifying Franklin on the Euro model, as we can see here. And then going out to about 150 hours out, we can see 969 millibars, and then eventually there's an escape route. This might miss Nova Scotia as well, which is good news. This could end up being a very little threat to any other populated areas other than the Dominican Republic. So let's take a look at our steering flow. We're looking at 3 different layers here. We're looking at low-level vorticity, 500 millibar heights, and 200 millibar steering flow for this system. And so if we go back here, this is, we want the 12Z run. That's the most important one. We can see that we have another trough that is going to be imparting in about 3 or so days. we have this ridge right down in here. See this little bubble of thicker heights? That's going to be the culprit on why we're going to see Franklin kind of get ushered north, kind of slingshotted northward with time, as this ridge builds further east, or further west, I should say. It builds in, and that's going to help to allow this system to actually get steered northward. As this trough, this is fairly deep actually. It drops all the way down into the Great Lakes and allows Franklin to safely get absorbed into that trough. And this is some baroclinic deepening, so we're going to have to see on how Franklin here interacts with this trough. If we get baroclinic deepening, which would be a different processes versus tropical, it would transition into more extratropical at this point. We just don't know how that's going to all evolve. So now another model that I like to look at is the HAFS-A model. This is another hurricane specialized model. This is not a global model by any means. This is not your typical model that you should rely on. This is only for hurricanes. And what it's showing us is where we have Franklin right over the Dominican Republic. Again, this southwesterly and westerly belt of winds to the north. We have easterly winds here, so the system is located to the north of this subtropical anticyclonic flow in the 200 millibar layer. When we go forward in time here, let's see what happens with this. By about day 2, this gets, again, within this belt of westerly winds at 200 millibars. That's about 34,000 feet where jet planes fly. So about 30 to 40 knots here. And again, while the winds don't seem all that strong, the problem here is if we look at our low-level winds, the steering flow for this system is actually due northwest. So you got a competing steering flow here of northwesterly or southeasterly steering flow of about 5 to 10 knots, while you got northwesterly or westerly flow at about 30 to 40 knots. So that is very detrimental. This could actually almost decouple the system entirely. Wouldn't surprise me. But once this gets into a better environment, let's go back to our 200 millibar winds. You can see the outflow really gets established once this trough, this tut that is exhibiting that shear, actually backs away and is able to allow Franklin to thrive in a much better environment where it could intensify explosively quickly. Out to day 4 for Sunday, we have a 942, and then, wow, look at this. This is 931 millibars. That is a strong Category 3 or 4 hurricane. If this happens, this would be very strong. And right now, it is safely missing Bermuda on this one model run. We look at previous model runs. There's Bermuda right there. We look at the latest run. There's Bermuda there. So we can see how the last couple of runs, this has been trending further west, but not far enough west where the U.S. should be concerned. And then that kind of gets, that still intensifies as a hurricane because now the system is in light sheared environment. We take a look at our shear forecast. You can see very nice anticyclonic flow, which means that we have virtually no shear to talk about through the system, maybe about 5 knots or less, and that's going to allow this system to take off in a hurry. So now another model that I like to, or the spaghetti plot that is, this is really important because it gives us an idea of possible outcomes, like what-if situations. So, as you know, Dr. Levi Cowan does state this. Do not use this map to make decisions. Seek official info. And that seek official info is the NHC or hurricanes.gov for more information. Because spaghetti plots are not your forecasts. And they are just your guidance of possible outcomes. So when we look at the spaghetti plot, there are many different outcomes here, depending on just how the overall steering flow occurs to the north of the system. We have Bermuda right here, and so let's just assume again that trough that we talked about comes in a little later before say if Franklin's over here, or say that the trough, the tut that is developing, might slingshot this a little further east and then bounce it off to the north because that trough comes in later. We would see outcomes more to the right of the guidance. Say if the trough is sooner and the tut moves away faster, that would make conditions favorable, would likely lead to a system that moves to the left of the guidance. So there's a lot of what-if scenarios here, and therefore we cannot exactly pin down exactly if this is going to hit Bermuda, if it's going to get too close to Bermuda. We just don't have the answer right now. All we could have is a spaghetti plot, and there's a lot of wide outcome of scenarios here based on how this is all going to evolve out to day 5. And that's a big spread out to day 5, over 150 miles, showing you just how explicitly uncertain the forecast is. All right, so now taking a look at our intensity forecast, there is also some wide outcomes here. With Franklin, some models indicate that this could intensify very quickly. Some do not indicate that it may not even recover hardly at all. And partly because of that is just how strong the shear could linger over Franklin over the next couple of days. Like we talked about, that decoupling possibly might happen right around in here, which means the system could struggle to get better aligned once it is able to even recover from the shear in itself. However, most of the models do explicitly show a hurricane out to day 4 and 5, maybe even day 3, and the NHC does follow suit on that. Therefore, my intensity forecast, again, my intensity, not anyone else's, explicitly does show that this will become a hurricane, but I am slightly above the NHCs because based on the possible outcomes here, and I do forecast that this could become a very strong Category 2 hurricane with winds that could be 110 miles an hour at least. That would be close to a major intensity. Now, of course, this is not going to impact any land areas once it moves off of Hispaniola, but again, Bermuda is in some danger potentially with a landfall or a near landfall with strong winds. So again, this is a storm we're not going to ignore. So this is a look at the latest NHC forecast as of 5 p.m. when making this video, and we do have hurricane icons. And again, the cone of uncertainty does cover Bermuda, so anyone living in Bermuda definitely need to be keeping update on my videos on a daily basis, as you all have a possibility of getting a landfall there within the cone of uncertainty. This is not your wind field. This is just the realms of possibility. But again, strengthening will occur once we get into late Friday into the weekend, once it gets into that favorable environment. So now, just key messages that I wanted to share with you all from the 5 o'clock advisory from the NHC. Heavy rainfall from Franklin is expected across much of Hispaniola into Thursday, which is expected to produce significant and potentially life-threatening and urban and street flooding, as well as mudslides, particularly over the central Dominican Republic. Franklin is expected to bring tropical storm conditions to portions of the Dominican Republic where tropical storm warnings remain in effect. So just explicitly showing you all with what I mean by that. All right, so now the earliest reasonable time of tropical storm force winds. No one lives over the ocean, right? If we did, that would not be good. But people do live on Bermuda, so therefore you might want to make sure you have plans in place just in case if this does get awfully dangerously close to Bermuda. Not that Bermuda will get a direct landfall, but if it's like 5 or 10 miles offshore somewhere around the island, you could get hurricane force winds easily with a major hurricane. And there is now a 30 to 40% chance of tropical storm force winds by Sunday morning over Bermuda from her tropical storm Franklin. So now that we talked about Franklin, as that was very important to digest in the first 19 minutes, I think it's a good idea that we kind of spend a little bit of time on what might happen in the Gulf of Mexico. A few of my friends, Weather Nazario, Pat's Path Predictor, as well as Ethan B., and a few others are bringing this to my attention. Now, we did talk about Franklin, how it's a threat to, again, Hispaniola. Now, another area that we are going to need to watch is not any areas out here, since these are not going to be impacting land, so big X for those. Instead, we're going to have to watch on what might happen down here in the southwestern Caribbean of what may occur beyond 5 days out. The NHC has not put anything out on the system yet, no chances of development. I think they're going to do so either tonight or probably early tomorrow morning. Here's why I think that might be the case. So if we take a look at our, let's actually take a look at our, let's take a look at our moisture plot. So as you know, we have a lot of moisture down here. Let me use black. So quite a bit of moisture in the southwestern Caribbean over the next couple of days. And this trough axis, as what Dr. Levi Cowan was kind of outlining. Oops, I need to actually change sectors here. Sorry, folks, if I was not able to get that there. So this trough axis kind of runs all the way from Franklin all the way into the eastern Pacific. This trough axis is actually going to lift northward with time, as what Dr. Levi Cowan was saying on Tropical Tidbits on one of his videos. And that might spin up something. We got to see how this all evolves. This is 4 days out where, again, we have Franklin. We have this area that we got to watch in the northwestern Caribbean. Again, high upper ocean heat content, a lot of moisture in the deep layers, and very warm sea surface temperature values could allow some strengthening with the system. By day 5, though, however, we do got some shear and some dry air intrusions, which is why some of the other global models are not too excited and not really consistent at showing development. However, though, if this is able to come through with the Euro, this could develop in a bit of a hurry once this gets closer to, say, the Florida Peninsula as well as the panhandle of Florida as a strong tropical storm at the very most at the moment. We're not seeing any outcomes of a major hurricane at this point based on our ensemble forecast. If we go to the full screen, we can see some of the members here out today. This is about day 7, day 8. Yeah, there's some members here that do indicate tropical depression, tropical storm force outputs here, but nothing like what we will see with Franklin, which most of them show a major hurricane. So I think that's what we'll see with Franklin. However, we're going to have to really watch the Gulf of Mexico through the next 5 to 7 days for potential tropical development. All right, now before I do in the video, I do have a special VIP guest that would like to introduce herself very quickly in just a second. Let's hear it for Sarah Dutra.
Hello.
So, yep, she's visiting over the next 4 or 5 days. We're putting something together for a
50th wedding anniversary.
Yes.
A creative art life production.
Yeah. So we're working on that this week in the midst of me making these videos every single day for you all. Yes, don't worry. I'll be here doing the weather as I always have. We'll make sure it works out. Okay. We will make some time for that. In the meantime, while Sarah Dutra's here visiting.
Yay.
Yes.
Exciting time.
Yes. But anyways, everybody, if you did like today's detailed weather, today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion, please consider subscribing, sharing this video with your family and friends on social media. And I'll see you back here tomorrow in the home weather office with another update on the tropics. Can't forget about our lovely Franklin over here, which could be pretty surprising for Bermuda.